I was like, listen, there's like 3 people in this room. Let's play to them, And the energy, it just snowballed into one of the biggest fights we've ever had as a band. And somebody came up to us that night that was like, yeah, I work A&R for this label.
Oh my, that is the perfect end of that story.
You're listening
to the CD Baby
CD Baby
DIY
Musician
Podcast.
What's up, y'all? Welcome to episode 338 of the DIY Musician Podcast. My name is Chris Robley, and in a couple minutes, I'll bring Christina Cano on here as well. And today we're going to have a discussion about the 5 things we sure wish we knew when we first started making music, because our lives would be happier and more fulfilled and our music would be further along. But these are going to be lessons that for most people, especially younger artists, you're going to have to kind of learn the hard way through experience. And even as you gain more experience, you kind of have to keep relearning some of these lessons. So I think this episode will be useful if you're, just getting started, or if maybe you've been making music for a while and you just want a different lens to view where you're at. So stay tuned. Before I bring Christina on, just a couple bits of housekeeping. First, after the discussion that Christina and I have, we're going to have 2 quick new segments. The first new segment is called The World, and Erica Parr will be joining us to tell us what we should know, what we can learn from the breakout success of Peso Pluma, who's a Mexican artist who's doing really well globally and then also particularly in the United States. And that will be followed by a segment called The Deal, where Rue Wildeman will come on and tell us about something really cool that TIDAL has just launched and what it means, what you can do for your music on TIDAL. The next bit of housekeeping is that if you like this podcast, there are a whole bunch of little things you can do. You don't have to do all of them, maybe choose one. But you could like it, you could save it, you could subscribe, you can hit the notification bell on YouTube, you could tweet about it, you can leave a review. There's a lot of little things. They take, 10 to 60 seconds. And while that's not much time for you, it really has a big impact on us helping this podcast grow and reach more artists. So it would mean a lot to me if you do one of those things. Okay, I think that's all the housekeeping for now. Let me get Christina on here.
Hey, Chris, how you doing?
Pretty good. So I had this idea. Sometimes when my daughter comes home from school, I ask her what the peak and the pit of her day, like the high and the low, the good and the bad. So given that you just planned and hosted an amazing event in Nashville, I imagine you have both of those to talk about. What's the peak and the pit of your recent life?
Well, the peak was definitely Nashville, getting to see everybody in person and getting to hear how our previous events have also helped shape people's careers in some way. That was pretty freaking fulfilling. And I don't know about you. I mean, I do know about you because I saw some tears. I had tears of gratitude and joy and just major fulfillment. So that was genuinely my peak. And then my pit, it's June gloom here in California, which means it's perfect temperature, but it's really gray outside for the next month. And all I want to do is just go sit at the beach and have a good time. But I feel enveloped by gray. And I know that that's what some people deal with all year long, but
you lived in Oregon. What the hell?
I live in California now, so
you clearly lost your whatever Oregon.
I never had it, but I think I was kidding myself for a while there, thinking that it was romantic to have rain.
It makes you so deep.
Yeah, it just makes me depressed.
Well, I hope the weather changes soon for you.
What were yours?
I think the low point is more a general thing of I feel like I'm juggling 1,000 things, and some mornings I wake up and I'm like, oh God, I dropped 30 balls along the way and I didn't even notice. But one of the things I was juggling that I guess is the peak, I think, was I finally I've had all these sessions that I've recorded at home on Luna, which I use, the Universal Audio workstation, forever, and something was keeping me from finishing them, even though they all needed 1 or 2 things to send off. And on one of the songs, I finally finished it, shipped it off to a mixing engineer.
Oh, awesome.
And this might be pertinent to our conversation we'll have later, but the last song I put out was more than a year ago, which maybe for some people doesn't feel like a lot, but for me is maybe one of the longest breaks I've ever taken.
Sure.
So it kind of just felt I'm back in the swing of it now. So that was
back
nice.
in the saddle. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, all right. So speaking of our conversation we want to have, it's about lessons we wish we'd learned long ago.
I love this subject.
Yeah, set it up for us.
Okay, let's look back 20 years ago. You were wherever you were, wishing you could get a show, wishing you could put music out, not knowing how it worked, not knowing how do I get myself in a studio to record my first song. Maybe it wasn't 20 years ago for you. Maybe it was 50 years ago. Maybe it was 1 year ago. Regardless, there is a future where you get to look back and see all the progress that you've made, and you get to be super, super duper proud of all of that hard work. You figured it out. You hit a milestone after milestone after milestone, but there were probably bumpy things along the way. And so that's what we're going to talk about. Those things that we wish we had either seen the bumpy things or appreciated them more, or yeah. What about you?
Or seeing them in a different light. I think for me, that's a lot of this is just a different lens on. Well, all right, that was number one for me on the list was that you should know starting out you will never be cool enough.
No,
For
especially you. No, I'm just kidding.
I will never be cool enough. And this this is one of those things I kind of feel like I keep relearning, but at our conference recently, I interviewed Mary Gaucher, and she just strikes me as someone who like fully embodies herself for whatever that means to her. I know
Mhm.
it wasn't, I know she didn't arrive like that fully formed as like, and it's been, I've heard her talk about sort of the struggle of accepting various aspects of herself, but now there's just such a comfort with who she is that I think is
Mhm.
the coolest thing, even if it doesn't
Oh,
sort of tick the cool boxes or the hip boxes or whatever. Um, and so I think understanding early on, even if you do get to be hip or cool by other people's standards, trends change, you
mhm.
will age, power shifts in the industry in different ways. And one day you won't be as cool, or you won't be cool at all by other people's standards. Um,
Did you ever have a moment though where maybe you were on stage, you're backstage, whatever, where you're like, I am hot shit today. Like I freaking did it. Did you ever have a moment like that?
yeah, I
Yeah.
did. I still do. Like, and those are the kind of good moments I feel like where
Mhm.
like your confidence can be
Mhm.
driven by the right things and not by did this press outlet review me in a favorable light? Do these
Right.
cool other bands associate themselves with me? That's like all the bullshit I worried about so much in my
Mm.
20s that drove me nuts because I think it led to like bitterness and
Yeah.
resentment and like all that bad stuff. And then I also was aware of this thing like around like 2005-ish when Pitchfork was really becoming like
Mm.
such an obvious dominant force in the industry of like if you got a good review, it's like you
Then you
felt
had made it.
you had made it. But I I sort of started seeing this thing that I called the pitchfork problem where like
Mm.
artists who'd get like a 9 or 10-star review from Pitchfork, a year later they'd be like serving me coffee and
Right.
like whereas like
Totally.
Nickelback or whoever the butt of everyone's jokes are, who probably got a 1.5-star rating from Pitchfork, can sell out any venue in any town
Dude.
still to this day. So I'm like, who is this joke on? Like,
That is the existential plight of musicians, I think. It's like who we think is really cool generally by everyone else's standards, not good enough to be in the mainstream or to be in that top 40 or whatever. And I think that also comes from like being an artist for other artists sometimes.
yeah,
Like I love making music for other musicians to enjoy. Like I can get really heady, I can get really like, oh, it's going to be really everyone is going to be so impressed by the fact that I put so much work into the track list or whatever. Everyone's going to be so impressed that this like really flows perfectly or that I used this synth or whatever. And at the end of the day, like the people that care are the consumer, and the majority of consumer don't give a what you do. Oh, sorry, am I allowed to say that on
yeah,
podcast?
heck yeah, yeah.
Don't care what you do. and the people that are paying those big checks also just care about the consumer. So if you're an artist for artists, you're probably never going to be cool enough, but that's okay because you're cool for everyone else that cares. And yeah, the other thing too is like it can get really easy to get into that negative cycle of comparison, even whether
Mhm.
it's your local scene or you want to be as cool as St. Vincent or whatever. Like the continuing to try to be, like you said, like cool by someone else's standards or cool like somebody else just never works. Everyone can sniff it out. one, and two, you're never going to be someone else. So trying to live your fulfill some sort of dream idea of who the perfect you is just like isn't really sustainable because you're
Mhm.
just it's a carrot you're just dangling in front of yourself. Yeah.
Well, I forget if this was you or Kevin who had mentioned this after our conference, but the phrase like someone said like it is so nice to be amongst a group of such talented oddballs
Mhm.
at our conference, which is like, you know, not to say everyone who attends our conference feels like super authentic and empowered, but like there is that element of like, I don't know,
Mhm.
just letting yourself be
Oh,
you,
yeah.
warts and all, like is the coolest thing to me. And I think if you
Yeah.
try to be cool by other people's standards, it's like the opposite of empowerment. You're constantly disempowering yourself because you want validation.
I just had that experience actually at my wedding where I
Interesting.
looked around the room and we were like, "Oh man, we have the weirdest friends in the best way possible."
Uh-huh.
And all of them are musicians, different genres, different worlds, or artists, or some sort of like crazy maniacal person. And I'm sure to like our very straight-laced square family members, they were like, "These guys are weird." But to us, we were like, "They're perfect." And I feel that that's the best community is the one where it's just diverse. It all fits somehow because everybody owns who they are. And
Mhm.
so that's I think the best music community as well is the one where you're not afraid to just own it. Like you said, Mary goes go
Go Shay.
Gaucher. I always want to say Gautier because of that band. Remember
Yeah.
them? Gaucher is truly herself, owns it 100%, stands in that power. It's not like she makes a daily affirmation. Maybe she does, but doesn't like make a daily affirmation to be like, today I'm going to be a bad ass. Instead, she just is like, she's just like, whatever happens, like maybe today I sing about my gray hairs. I don't know.
Mhm.
Owning those things that you're like afraid don't make you cool. And I definitely still need to teach myself that lesson every single day,
Me
including
too.
today when I was like, "Is this blue too blue?"
I'm glad you picked blue because I have a blue shirt on. We didn't coordinate it. Yeah, so I guess to wrap up this part of the discussion, I think what was I gonna say? Yeah, so like if you understand early that you will never be cool enough by other people's standards, I think it gives you permission to accept yourself and do what you want to do. Like
Mhm.
you do you, leaning into that as much as possible is going to be a quicker way for you to find fulfillment and making yourself distinct from everyone else. So
Mhm.
so yeah,
And
stop
whether
trying to be cool.
yeah, not not to get in the last word on this one, but
Do it.
it's not just about being cool visually or in style or in air. It's also like musically. Like don't try to push yourself to sound like anyone other than yourself. Unless you really want to try something new, go for it. Like aim for new goals, but at the end of the day, don't try to sound like someone just because you know that's what's selling
Mhm.
because that isn't that again, everyone can sniff that out.
Yeah. Well, the second thing that was on my list, I wanted to say when you're starting out, you should understand that no fan base is too small. And I say that because I remember thinking early on, there's only 10 people at this club.
Mhm.
There's only, I've only sold this much, whatever the metric is, you're not going to have enough of it by whatever dream that you've set. And at
Mhm.
the same time, if you have the wrong attitude about it, you can very quickly make that the audience's fault.
Yeah.
These friggin' idiot. No, they're not the idiots. They're the ones who showed up. And uh, you've probably heard us talk on this podcast a lot about how people need a kind of permit, like a social permission to be an advocate of your music. And so your early fans are being trendsetters. They are brave enough to say, I'm supporting you, even when the rest of the world doesn't even know who you are, which they're the star in this
Mhm.
equation, not you. They're not letting you down. The people who aren't there aren't letting you down because they're not there yet. So you have to basically treat that small audience like they're absolute gold and a resource you can't do without because they're all you have, like literally.
Absolutely. 2 things on that. One, I in the past, I've heard you and Kevin mention that your friends and your family aren't your fans, and while I agree with that sentiment, I do wanna push back against that a little bit in that your friends and your family are your first fans. They're the ones that you get to really lean on, and they're the definitely the building blocks for creating a fan base community. So I remember my first show in Portland, Oregon in 2008. I had just moved there. I didn't know anyone except for a boyfriend and his parents. And they were the only people sitting in the Mississippi Pizza Pub when I played my first show. And you know what? I am so grateful for that, because that gave me the confidence to keep going, to keep building, and to go on to bigger and better shows. I also have played another show once with a different band that wasn't my own. And we were in Nashville at the Exit Inn, coolest venue. No one was there. Like, it was like 3 people in the audience. It was cold. It was like, at that point in tour where you're just like, why are we doing this? And everyone was in a bad mood. And the lead of the band got really upset that there was no one there and played a terrible show. I'm not going to out who they were, but you can figure it out. Played a terrible show. And like got mad at the audience, just like didn't give them anything. And I got mad at them for being so rude to the audience and was like, you can't treat people like this, like blah, blah. We got into a big fight backstage. And that energy, yeah, I mean, that was like how I felt about it. I was like, listen, there's like 3 people in this room. Let's play to them, And the energy, it just snowballed into one of like biggest fights we've ever had as a band. And at the same time, I think somebody came up to us that night that was like, yeah, I work A&R for this label.
Oh my, that is the perfect end of that story.
And I was like, see?
And were they like, I do A&R for this label and you guys played a shitty show?
I don't know, but I do remember it didn't reflect well. And we all felt really bad about it afterwards. Like, we could have done better for those 3 people. So
that was
a big lesson.
That was the perfect anecdote for you to share, because what I was going to say was something a little more vague. Like, when you make it the audience's problem internally, everyone can tell. Everyone in the room knows that you're an entitled little punk who's too good for the people in the room. And as soon as anyone feels that, your show is done. Like, who gives a shit about you at that point? Like,
yeah. So. Also, why are you? I get that it feels really good to have 100,000 followers on Spotify, or 500 people selling out that big venue or whatever, or 30 people selling out that small venue. Like, it feels really good when the walls are so packed that people can barely breathe and they're just climbing them to like listen to you play. And you can hear a pin drop because it's so quiet because everyone's so intently listening in on your set. But at the end of the day, that's not like sustainable every single day, unless you're, freaking Billie Eilish or something. Like, it's just, that's not how it works. So being grateful for the people that are there, like, you never know who's there. You never know who's going to be able to help you out the next set or whatever. Maybe it's just the bartenders. I played a show where we were like the last and everyone left before we played. And all that was left was the bartenders. And they came up to me later and they're like, man, we wish everyone had stayed because this was awesome. And I was like, well, I'm glad you liked it. So,
yeah. Well, and the same thing goes for how you treat your email list, or even engagement on social. Like, I posted this thing that I was really proud of on Instagram and only 15 people liked it. Maybe I should take it down. No, don't take it down. People may not have seen it for 100 different reasons. And those people who liked it may have really enjoyed it. And same thing, if you have 100 people on your email list and to you that feels small, so you don't want to make a merch offer because they won't want to buy. Like, the people on the list don't know there's only 100 people on the list. Treat them like individuals. Treat them, almost like you have a fan base of millions and they mean the world to you, because again, that's all you have.
Yeah. If 5 people buy your CD, treat them like gold.
Yeah. Well, let's see, the next thing on this list. This one is almost, I feel like, impossible for someone who's younger to grasp. But it's basically that time speeds up as you age. And there's like a scientific explanation that I'll botch right now, but basically my understanding of it is that when you're young, let's say you're 5 years old, the scope of your entire existence is 5 years. So getting to 10 years old is literally doubling everything in your life. So it feels like it takes forever. Then when you get to 15, suddenly that growth is only a third of your life. And then, so the increments as a percentage get smaller and smaller of your total experience. So your perception of time, like literally does speed up. And I think there's Um, Two things that can kind of come of that. Like for one, don't rush, because I remember in my 20s, like taking a week off of music felt like a sin.
Mhm.
And like my drummer at the time would go back home. He lived in Mississippi, and he'd go back home maybe 3 or 4 times a year for a week or two. And I thought that was absolutely terrible. I'm like, this is basically the same as quitting the band. We
Mhm.
need to be available to practice. We have to play gigs. If you go home that much, like, it just seemed preposterous, like treason to me. And
Mhm.
all he was doing was maintaining the most important relationships in his life, his, immediate family. And what was it, 4 or 5 weeks out of the year? Like, I couldn't make do with literally the entire rest of his year. And so now, having said earlier, like I've taken a year off from releasing anything. This will be the first thing I've put out in a very long time. It almost feels like nothing. In a way, I'm like, oh, I took a year off, whatever.
Yeah,
Anyways, I don't know if that makes any sense, but
it
don't be
does.
in such a desperate rush, I guess.
I can absolutely resonate though with the anxiety of time in between releases. Every single time I put out an album, I say, this time I am not going to wait 4 years to put out my next album. And here
And
we
then you
are.
do.
Yeah, almost 2.5 years later. And because it's hard. Takes time to be creative. But yeah, it took me a long time to realize that when you take like a month off of writing or a month off of playing even, for me, it's been a few years since I've performed. It doesn't mean I'm not a performer. And it takes a long time to sort of like come to terms with the fact that time and rest is important. Like that is part of the creative process. Everything is seasonal. Like you can't just like harvest all winter long. You need to have that time to rest. You need to have that time for your mind to settle. And even if you're like, maybe you're really like a disciplined writer, you're able to go in every single day, write a page, write a lyric, whatever, write a whole song every day. You're going to hit a point where you still need to take a break, because taking that break is like coming up for air. Like you need to be able to come up for air. Every runner doesn't just keep running. Like they have to
Mm.
take a break. They need to have some water. They need to eat something with nutrients. Like you need to be able to like take care of yourself. And so that anxiety though that can happen when there's too much time in between can feel really intense when you're younger. And then I do feel like I don't know, as I'm getting older, it can feel almost more overwhelming in certain ways where I'm just like, I'm running out of time. But maybe that's also just like, I need to get through this cloud, like this is just a phase of feeling like you're running out of time.
Well,
Because I
yeah,
am young. I mean,
yeah.
yeah.
I think when you're saying sort of the runners need to rest and stuff, one of the detrimental aspects of this perception when I was younger of like, it needs to happen now, I can't take a break,
Mhm.
go, 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 is like, it also puts you in this desperate habit of releasing everything you do. Like, not
Mhm.
every idea you have needs to be a thing.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
don't vomit out literally every social post that comes to your mind or every song you record.
Mhm.
Um, and I think, yeah, in that desperation, I didn't let things marinate enough,
Right.
or I wasn't as,
Strategic.
yeah, picky and then at the same time, there's also like you have to resist the opposite tendency, which I don't know if this is exactly what you're talking about. Is you've gotten older, but like for me, now that a year feels like an acceptable break time,
Mhm.
I think you could also lose momentum, and suddenly what's the difference between that and 10 years? And then time has slipped
Amen.
by
That's
because
what
you
I'm
feel like
getting
it's
at.
okay to rest. I'm like,
Mhm.
so yeah, that you don't want to get apathetic either, I guess, don't be desperate and don't be apathetic. Somewhere in between is
And taking time also gives you an opportunity to reset your goals and your values and your ideas of success, because what I thought was the end goal at 25 is not the case anymore. Like that is not what I want to do anymore full time. I tried a
mhm.
taste of it. It was fun, but it was a lot of work, and I realized, you know what? It doesn't mean that I'm not a hustler, because I definitely am, but I have different ideas of how I want to spend my time hustling. So, taking time to rest will give you that necessary like mental capacity space to be able to figure out what it is that you actually want without having to like live by somebody else's ideas of what success means or what your past versions of yourself assumed you would be by now. That sort of thing can really hold you up, I think, in your art.
Well, I think that's a good segue to the next thing. So one of the lessons I wish I had learned younger is that like adulting and having shifting priorities and more responsibilities actually can deepen
Mm,
your art and the truth of your
mhm,
art. It doesn't necessarily rob it. And when I was, again, like in my 20s, in that desperate time to make it all happen now, it's also this time where I'm like, oh my God, I was living almost 100% for music. Like my
mhm.
entire life was music. Like
Oh, yeah.
going to shows, recording, practicing, like literally obsessive every second of every day. And you think at the time that that's great. And in some ways it is. You would shed or whatever the term, you get good at your instrument. You tend to be out in social. So you make some community. There's a lot of good about it. But there's also something that's pretty shallow about it. And I
Mhm.
feel like I can confidently say, I hope anyone who listens to my music would agree, I've become a much better songwriter when I've spent a lot less time on my music in a way and more time on
Yeah.
my life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know about you, but I made some really selfish choices because I thought they would make great themes for art in
Mhm.
relationships or whatever. Like, there was definitely an era where I wasn't the best partner to other people or like person to other people because I thought this is like how I'm going to shape my art. I'm just going to like have heartbreak after heartbreak or whatever. And I remember thinking like, well, what am I going to write about when I finally fall in love? And now that I have, there's a lot. There's a lot there. We're fine. I'm good. I've got plenty to write about. It doesn't mean I don't have existential dread or heartbreak every single day or whatever. Like that stuff will always be there, babe. You don't have to like rest on the laurels of like life being this like ride or die every single day is drama. It
Yeah.
doesn't need to be because your life will be drama even if you make it or not. Um, and yeah, I was really worried about getting older and boring or whatever. And maybe by some 23-year-old standard, I might be boring, but I still can write.
Well, and the other thing is like you can make all the effort in the world to stay 100% dedicated music or else,
Totally.
but life is coming for you, like caring for elders, sort of accidentally falling in love, like whatever it is, responsibilities are headed your way no
Oh my
matter what.
gosh.
I think for me, when I look back, like those changes weren't easy for me sometimes, and like learning how to be a good partner and a good
Mhm.
co-parent and how to be a parent and
Yeah.
all these things were sometimes they were even fights. It's like because I felt like I was giving up something that was supposed to be for the music. Then in
Mhm.
hindsight, I'm like, no, all it did was make me learn how to care for other people better. And
Mhm.
so in doing that, I sort of care for the people in my songs more.
Yeah.
It's just I basically
You have
was
a
kind of
deeper.
forced to practice empathy.
Yeah, I mean, you have more people to love, so your well has gotten deeper for sure. And actually, I want to do a whole podcast episode just about being a musician and being a parent because I feel like that must be such like a deep, deep, deep well of feelings and so many conflicting things
Oh,
come
so
out.
much.
And like also just as a musician, I'm not there yet, but it's closer and closer, and it's one of those things I'm like, "Oh my god, how will I still be an artist?" But, like, I see everyone around me that is, and they can fully pull it off. So I do think that there's, like, these anxieties that the next milestone is gonna make life more challenging as an artist, or the next milestone is gonna or, like, I'm gonna avoid this milestone because then it'll stunt my art, and that's just not the case. It's just a matter of reshifting the narrative that you put in your own mind.
Well, I do think like it does make it more challenging in certain ways. That's totally true. Like you can't just say yes to whatever at any old time. Even something like spending money on your music becomes a
Mhm.
more of a negotiation because that's family money now and
Right.
not just me doing whatever the hell I want on a credit card or something. So yeah, there's a lot of negotiation, but I think at just in terms of finding artistic truth and like quality of work, it can stay the same or get better with more going on in your life. And you'd also said like, how do people find the time? And I think, do you know the term optimizer?
Like time optimization?
Yeah, well, it's like the type of person who's like they've time blocked their entire day. They're like
Right.
on
I was just thinking about these people
creatine, they lift weights, they like
Yeah.
everything they speed read. Everything they do is about optimizing everything. And I kind of think it's sort of a joke and a caricature of a certain type of person. But in some ways, like being a parent or having more responsibilities forces you to at least optimize the time you dedicate to your creativity.
Mhm.
And I think as long as you can hold on to keeping that time sacred, then you can still do good work.
Yeah, I mean, those sorts of people can seem really intense, but I also like have a deep envy for people that can stay that's like consistently organized. Or I mean, I am all over the place when it comes to organization and time management. I've got like 4 different web apps calendars, plus 2 different types of physical planners that I use, plus a calendar on the wall, and yet I still can just let everything fall through the cracks every single day. So, or like you're like, tomorrow I'm going to wake up early. I'm going to spend an hour writing music, and then I'm going to get to my emails, and then I'm going to blah, blah, blah. And then like the morning comes and you're like, I could just stay in bed another 3 hours and figure it out later, And so, yeah, I'm very interested actually in how a lot of artists that have become like have families or whatever, have to like really carve that space out for themselves. And I've worked with artists that have, are in the very early stages of parenting or whatever, where they're like, no, I'm burnt out. There's no way. I can't write a single lyric. I can't even sit down to breathe. So no, that's not happening. But I will show up to band practice. And I always find those people to be like so inspiring to me. So I'm like, you may not have like the creative light inside of you right now, but you're still like putting in the work. You're still going and working out at the gym,
Yeah. Well, and also I'm imagining I'll still show up at band practice. I might be 20 minutes late.
Yeah. You have to have space for those people. Every band I've been in has had like a dad in it. So and one time
you make dad rock?
Yeah, I guess so. One of my favorite guitarists, Eric Clampett, I remember once we were at a party and somebody was like, "Hey, Eric, will you join our band?" And his wife steps in. She's like, "No, he's in like 6 bands already. Absolutely not."
He's outsourced his time blocking.
Yeah.
Well, the last thing I had on my list is, I think for me, like the most profound lesson, which I really did learn too late in a lot of ways, which is the key to fulfillment is gratitude. I was a bit sort of afraid of being vulnerable. I was a bit passive, maybe passive aggressive. So I was not the best at communicating my grievances when they were legitimate. I probably had grievances that were not legitimate. And I think also when I had like genuine feeling of gratitude, I was reluctant to share it. So something as simple as like, wow, that was a great drum solo. Thanks for being in my band. Like wasn't easy coming out of my mouth. So I think I was, just really terrible at showing gratitude, and I paid for it. I lost 2 or 3 of my closest musical relationships then because of, I'm not going to entirely take the blame for it, but I could have done a way better job of being proactive in my communication. And then in my 30s, because I learned that lesson very the hard way, I think I overcompensated, and I'm fine staying there. Like I've tried to be out of my comfort zone in just being like effusive with praise, and so thankful when people contribute to my work or collaborate with me or show support for my work. I'm like, when's the point at which they're going to be like, dude, we know,
yeah,
you're thankful enough. But anyways,
definitely
be thankful and show it.
There are times where I'm like, does it come off as phony when I'm showing all this gratitude? It's like genuine gratitude. Absolutely 100%. If it's coming out of my mouth, it's going to be genuine. But there were definitely times in my earlier years playing music where either it wasn't just a lack of gratitude, but a lack of honesty. Like you may not like what this person is contributing to your music, and you're not using the right language to like verbalize that. So instead it's like this passive aggressive, like, just not verbalizing it until it comes to a head. And then also not giving that person, like you said, gratitude for even being a part of this process. Like that, the fact that anybody carves time out of their life to help support your artistic vision is incredible. Like it is incredible that we do this with one another. That's one of my favorite parts about being a musician, is how like collaborative we are and how much of a community we can be when we're not being competitive or whatnot. So the fact that anybody's even playing music with you, the fact that anybody is taking time out of their life to listen to your music is next level. The fact that anyone is taking time out of a Wednesday night at 9 p.m. to go see your band play at a bar when they could be at home watching Succession or whatever. Like, it is insane that people do that and that they come out and they support you. So just please say thank you. Please.
Yeah, it's kind of a miracle that they choose to do that with their time. I think like in my case, the way things come out, yeah, like thinking about passive aggressivity, is that a word?
Mhm.
Like in my mind, it's what I should have said is I need help. I'm feeling
Mhm.
overwhelmed by driving this ship. But
Oh,
instead it comes out as, why the hell aren't you helping me? We're supposed to be in this together. Are you lazy? That I didn't say it exactly like that, but there's just this tone. Whereas, and then, a different person, it's like, I find these two things about you difficult when we're on tour.
yeah.
Instead it's like, you hate touring and you make it miserable, like just like, um,
God, you're speaking like, is this a universal thing?
it must
Every
be.
single thing that you've said, I'm like, oh, bad story there. I got a bad story there.
And I don't, it's like no surprise to me that the oldest person in my band, our bass player, Arthur, at the time, kind of, I think, had already learned a lot of these
Yeah.
lessons. And so when we would travel, like what drove
Mhm.
him nuts about me is when I would try to pack the van, because he was way more engineering Tetris about it. And I remember I was driving him crazy one day and he was just like, I need you to leave
Mhm.
me alone during this process. And, like he was just
Yeah.
so direct, and it felt sort of like, oh, but I was so appreciative that he had been forceful with his truth in that moment, because
Yeah.
I stayed the out of his way and we got along great after that. So like I needed to do a lot more of that and I didn't.
I know that we said 5, but I'm just gonna throw a few under number 5
Okay, let's
because
do it.
you've touched on them already. One is absolutely, it is okay to not do it all yourself. It is okay to not be your own songwriter, producer, mixing, mastering engineer, manager, licensing expert, guitar player, drummer, whatever. Like, it's okay to ask other people for help. It's okay to tell the drummer, hey, I could really use your help with some promotion, or asking the bass player, you know what, you're way better at this than me. You get to load the van from now on. Like, it's okay to ask for help. I don't know if this is a universal thing. Maybe this is I don't know. I don't think it's gendered, but like, as a woman in music, I think I always wanted to prove something and always wanted to be like, I can do it all. Okay. I am a triple, quadruple, quintuple threat.
Uh-huh.
And it's taken, and still to this day, ego can get in the way of being like, you know what? I'm going to release the reins on this. I don't need to write every stitch of the song. I don't need to produce the whole thing. I don't need to be the one in charge of everything. So that was a big one. And then being grateful for those that, like we said, like stepped in and take the reins for you. Like, that is, they don't have to do that. Chances are they're not getting paid enough to do that for you.
Right.
And they're doing it anyway.
Oh, I share that sentiment so much. Like, as I became more thankful, I've
Mhm.
also opened up ownership of quote my art to those people,
Yeah.
to where they're more invested. I'm more happy with the work, like, less stress to do it all myself.
And
Whereas
it's
that,
better.
yeah, it's better. And the ego voice is like, I need all the credit. I need
Yeah.
everyone to see that I did it all because I'm whatever, seeking whatever
Mhm.
from them.
Oh,
But
it gets in the way all the time, where I'm like, I need everyone to know that I wrote everything in the song. And it's like, okay, well, sure, no one cares.
no one
Like,
cares.
the 3% of people that check songwriter credits, like myself, to check to see if they wrote the whole thing, are assholes. I'm an asshole. Okay. I'm checking to see if Taylor Swift wrote her lyrics. Okay. And I know that she didn't. And I have feelings about that. But like,
Ooh, you're
but
gonna get some Taylor Swift hate now, because
oh, yeah.
I think she does write lyrics. I mean,
Oh,
probably not
well,
all of them, but
whatever. That was a bad example of someone I've never listened to her music, and I have a lot of opinions. See? An asshole. So, but for the most part, like, you don't have to do it all yourself, and nobody cares that you didn't. In fact, people are probably more impressed that you're able to put a team together and that you're able to, like, run the ship of a multifaceted community of helpers. So, that's that. And then the other one was, you never know who's gonna be in charge one day. Like, you never know who you might piss off one day, and they might be in charge of a big life opportunity for you, or life, like they might be a manager at the label or whatever, or they might be like the new playlist curator for Spotify or whatever. Treat everybody with respect if you can. Some people, maybe they rub you the wrong way and maybe you rub them the wrong way, but that doesn't mean you have to be jerks to one another. I've definitely have been a jerk before and it hasn't paid off. It hasn't been great afterwards. So just keeping that in mind, that was like one of the, when we were talking about the 5 things we wish we knew when we started, it was, oh yeah, I was a jerk to a few people and they blocked opportunities, or like that didn't pay off in the future, you know?
You said maybe we could conclude with something you said towards the beginning of the discussion, which I think was something like sort of the moments that seem so hard now, or the attitudes you have that are really like demoralizing or whatever. Maybe
Yeah.
the very moments that later in your life you're like, those were the good old days.
Oh, yeah.
Wasn't everything great then? What an adventure we were on.
Oh man. I think about the first few tours I ever went on and like crying in the van because of like whatever it's your first time on the road and there can be a lot of feelings with that and whatever. And I look back and I realize those were the freaking glory days. Like, I don't know when I'm going to go on tour for 4 months at a time again. I don't know when I'm going to be able to be that sleep exhausted and be hungry and miss my family or whatever. Like, that is such a precious time in life. And I think the thing I'm learning as I'm getting older is that every hard period of time is a time I end up looking back on and thinking, that was nice. I was really living. You know, you never know when that job is going to end. You never know when that gig is going to end, when that band is going to split up. You never know when a worldwide pandemic is going to come along and stop you from being able to play shows for 3 years. You don't know what's going to happen. And so living every moment it's like the most cliche thing I could say, but just live every moment like it's gone tomorrow because it may be. You never know. So is that dark? I don't know. That's my
No.
brand. Welcome.
I was going to say, I think that's the perfect way to just conclude this segment. Dark, poignant. It's not really dark. It's like,
It's not dark.
you're just asking people to appreciate what they have.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks, guys.
Now we have 2 brand new segments. This is something we've never done on the podcast before, is have like anchor. No, we're the anchors and they're the correspondents. So we need to get a correspondent on.
Did it.
So first up, we're going to have Erica Parr presenting a segment called The World, and I'll bring her on in a sec.
I'm Erica, and I'm an international content manager here at CD Baby, and I'm going to be popping here sometimes to talk about international music and Latin music in general, what's going on, what you should look for, and what to pay attention, and some stories to get inspired. I thought we'd start with a little summary of the Latin music in the US. So in the 80s, we saw lots of crossover acts. At that point, some music would be that crossover to the US market, but mostly artists would have to record in English eventually. And then in the 90s, we saw Selena. Selena was the queen of Tejano, and she came to just break all the barriers. She was the first Latin artist to get #1 singles. And after her tragic death that most of us know about, she became an inspiration to many other artists to just follow her legacy. And from that, we see names as Rick Martin, Shakira, Thalia, and in the 2000s, that's when we see a boom of Latin music, however, with fewer names. But you also saw the tendency of artists having to record in English in order to really break into the market. And then you come to 2010 and beyond. 2014, you had the Brazilian World Cup and a massive representation of Latin artists on that opening. And then you jump forward to today. And if you double check the global chart, 50 top US and global, you are going to be surprised to see that is dominated by Latin artists. Right now, if you open the top 50 Mundo, global in this case, you're going to see that the top 4 artists there are Latino artists. In top 50 USA, you're going to see from the top 4 to a Latino artist. And on that note, I want to talk about a rising star, Mexican rising star called Peso Pluma. So Peso Pluma is a young artist. He's born in 1999 in Guadalajara, Mexico. He began playing guitar really young in his teens, and he had a love for Mexican music, regional Mexican music. Fast forward to today, he became a huge influence in mixing regional Mexican music with modern vocals. If you hear his music, you're going to expect something, hear something else, but it's going to be infectious.
Here with his U.S. TV debut, performing the #1 Latin song in the country, Ella Baila Sola. Give it up for Peso Pluma!
Peso didn't start it yesterday, but I know that some of you probably have that sensation when you see a name like him appearing from nowhere. But Peso has been working for a while, and it's good to exercise that when you see new artists, you have the tendency to, how is this just coming from nowhere? Most artists that appearing now have been long time doing this work, and he ended up going viral. In 2022, had one of his songs going viral on TikTok with a collaboration with an artist named Raul Vega. And he enjoyed that moment. From that point on, he just didn't stop. We saw Peso Pluma on Coachella. He had special participation with Becky G. And then weeks later, we saw him on the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, the first regional Mexican artist to be featured in a major late night show. When you ask why is this happening, I think the logical answer is before these artists needed to be physically in these territories. They literally needed to have CDs and vinyls present in stores, or they needed a breakthrough like the movie La Bamba, where everywhere in the world you would hear that song, but it was a catalyst of the movie. So if you want to talk about how we landed today with 4 Latino artists on the top 50 global, the rise of the Latin music in North America can be a combination of a few decades of cross-gender collaboration, more representation, and cultural influence inside of the US. While there are still folks talking about building walls, music is coming in strong to destroy all of them, and you can expect more of that, like Peso Pluma.
Thanks, Erica. I have a question for you. So when you said he's bringing his modern take to the sound, like, how do you define it? Like, what's different about it from the regional influences?
I think when it comes, from my perspective, when it comes to the tone of voice, it can be even similar, but it's just the attitude that it changed. You know, there's an attitude to him, and honestly, what I think is even more to be said about Peso Pluma is that we have seen culturally an attack on Mexico and Mexico culture in general. So bringing this to light and seeing those sounds, I feel that he's proudly representing not just classical Mexican music, but what's going on today. And I think that's to be said to any new artist that is coming. Don't forget about your roots. There are things that you can, revive or enjoy and work in a way that is going to maybe be transformed in something new, but not necessarily. It's just, I feel that old and new are now holding hands in order to get that music out and create a sensation that Mexico, it is a rich country, and it's not about just what we hear in the news and what is being told to us. And that can be said to any other Latin country and artists that are now trying to break into the US market.
And anytime you create anything, even if it's traditional, if there's a traditional sound behind it, your unique voice will always make it different. So even if you're paying homage to traditional, like let's say in the US, it's traditional folk music or whatever, you're still making something a little bit different because your voice will transform it into something unique.
and if you see some of his past work, there's going to be a different, you're going to feel that you are jumping to different genres, because you can see that he's evolving as he defines what he's going to become. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. If I listen to something that Sarah in the Sea created 10 years ago, and then I hear her modern take today, I think we all should embrace change, and that serves for new and old generations, right? I have
Totally.
new generations kind of like not, I wouldn't say respect, but maybe not understanding the power of classical and everything that came before. And then we have this older generation kind of like not understanding the power of that this Gen X is bringing to the table.
I had a point that really fascinated me from what you said, from the standpoint of like music distribution and technology and how people listen to music, is like these stories of import, export, international sharing of music were so infrequent in the past, because you had to literally ship like thousands of tons or pounds of vinyl and CD all around the world, and that cost a whole lot of money, and that just was not a reality for most artists. And now it's like you just have a phone, and so whether it's TikTok or Spotify or whatever, there's like the same barriers exist for everyone around the world, or the lack of barriers now. And I'll play that video from Coachella in a second, but when he's introduced, the entire crowd starts cheering, like they know who he is. They're excited to see him.
Mm-hmm.
And that just seems like that would only happen now in a smartphone age. Like he wouldn't have gotten that reception 50 years ago. People would have been like, who? So
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'll play that video real quick.
Hay por ahí mi hermano Peso Pluma. Una y otra vez cometimos errores que no se arreglan ya. Cuento de nunca y acabar, vamos a aceptar. Tú por aquí, yo por allá. ¡Y ese grito de todo mi gente de Coachella!
Beautiful.
Amazing. Was that Becky G?
Yes, I believe so.
I love her.
Yeah, it's just, I just can't take the smile off on my face, because I feel like there's no way back from this. And
Mhm.
I appreciate
It's
the
huge.
blend. Yeah, I appreciate the blend. And just to kind of like on a note that I wanted to mention as I got in today, why did I wake up listening to Indian metal today? Why I was listening to Indian metal today? Because yesterday someone fed me this on TikTok, and I thought it was the greatest thing ever, right? India have metal. So yes, it has changed. I, a Brazilian living in the US, would not be listening to Indian heavy metal if it wasn't for the social media breakthrough videos and the fact that now people are less connected to words and technicalities and more about sensations and feelings.
Yeah.
Love it.
And then one last thing you said I wanted to just reiterate for our audience is this is not an overnight success, even though he's, quote, new to most of the world. Like, you've been paying attention to him for quite a long time. And I know he had some overlap with some people from the CD Baby crew, and like,
Yes.
it's working, grinding it out. And then after all that work, he's suddenly like an overnight success. But
Correct. Know when to look for a team. There's an amazing team behind Peso Pluma with folks that we had the luck to work with. And I think that's important to know too. See the signs, look for a team, enjoy that opportunity, and it can happen. It happened to Peso. He was serving tables and working as a obrero, construction worker, just not long ago. And he's touring in the US the next few weeks. I'm going to be there. So don't give up.
that's awesome. Well, thanks for being a part of this. We'll hear from you in a month or so.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me, you both. And I'm really looking forward to all that's new into the podcast. Christina,
Thank you, Erica.
welcome, Christina.
Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce our new business-oriented segment, The Deal with Rue Wildeman.
Hello, thanks for having me on. My name is Rue. I am the Strategic Partner Manager for Platforms and DSPs on CD Baby's Business Development and Partnerships team. I've been working for CD Baby for about 4.5 years now, and I'm thrilled to talk to you today about TIDAL's new Artist Home dashboard. So the dashboard is a brand new launch, and CD Baby is thrilled to be a launch partner and get you access to your profile on TIDAL. All you need to do to be eligible to get your profile on the new Artist Home dashboard is live in one of the countries where TIDAL operates, which you can find a full list on our DIY blog article about the dashboard, which Chris wrote for you all. And as long as you live there and you have delivered some music to TIDAL from CD Baby, you are eligible to go ahead and get your profile. So you want to log into your members account, members.cdbaby.com, and head over to the Tools and Promotions dashboard. There you will find a tile for TIDAL Artist Home Dashboard where you can click and get started on the process of signing up. Once you're all signed up and you are in your account, you will be able to do things like edit your artist image, add a bio that connects you more deeply with your fans, send your fans to your website, to your socials, and you will also be able to identify any content that might not be yours on your account. So if any reason there's music by another artist with a similar name or something like that, you can identify those right in the sign up flow so your profile is ready to go for you right off the bat. So exciting. Another key feature that TIDAL Artist Home Dashboard currently offers is the ability for you to give permissions and access to your team. So if you work with a manager, an ad studio, label, marketing person, any of those things, you can give them access to log in and make changes and updates on your behalf. You can also keep an eye out for new feature updates and tool updates from TIDAL because this is just the beginning. This is a brand new launch and more features will be coming soon, including fan analytics. So keep an eye out for any new updates from TIDAL on that in the coming months. And in the meantime, be sure to go over to the Tools and Promotions tab and get your profile updated today on TIDAL.
Thanks. This is like the least important thing I could say for artists who need to know anything about what you just said, but we got to hang out with some of the TIDAL folks a week or two ago, and they're good people. I like them.
Absolutely. Yes. I've been working really closely with the TIDAL team as they were coming up on this launch to roll out this tool. And it's just an amazing company filled with some of the best people I've ever gotten to collaborate with. So I really am excited about this launch.
Christina, have you claimed your profile yet?
No, but I will now, especially that I know how to do it.
Awesome. One other thing I was going to say in the article that I wrote, if you go to the DIY Musician blog, there's a couple links, not specifically related to TIDAL Artist Home, but you might be interested in. They have a program called TIDAL Rising, which is sort of an artist support, just putting some monetary investment behind different emerging artist careers. So check that out. They have all the details about how you can apply for that. And what was the other thing? Oh, I forget what the specifics of their payment model is, but I know that they always kind of are trying to do something fairer, more equitable in the pay department.
Yeah. They recently had the TIDAL Direct Artist Payout Program. That has ended now because they are kind of going back to the drawing board, trying some different things out, which you see across the industry. Honestly, you're seeing a lot of different trends among DSPs trying to find different ways to pay out artists in a more equitable way. So definitely interested to keep our eyes on the horizon for new things coming from TIDAL and other platforms on that front.
Well, thanks for doing this. I think we'll try to get back once a month or so, and you can tell us what we need to know.
Awesome. Absolutely. Yeah, I'll bring all the DSP and platform news to you. So thanks again for having me.
I'm happy we had these new segments. I could tell how much that music meant to Erica because she was really kind of lighting up talking about those.
Well, she got to help we as CD Baby, but also mostly Erica and her team got to help that artist get to where they are now. I mean, they were playing on a massive stage. I mean, that's pretty exciting to see that happen.
Yeah. Another thing I was going to say about Rue's segment is that, I wonder, on the one hand, artists are probably like, oh, cool, I can brand myself on TIDAL. And then I'm also imagining our listeners being like, oh, no, one more thing on the list. But go do it. It's super easy. Honestly, I think I claimed my profile and outfitted it with a bio and pictures and stuff in 2 minutes. So it's worth doing. We probably point this out all the time, but like your listeners aren't all in one place. They're spread across platforms, across social platforms. So TIDAL is, particularly in the US, a very important player that you don't want to ignore your presence and your brand there. So just go do it. It takes 2 minutes. Last thing I was going to say is that I feel like our last 3 or 4 episodes have all been like deep, philosophical, like a little self-helpy, which is great.
Which, like, who are we to be giving advice? I mean, just because we have a podcast and we have a couple microphones doesn't mean we know everything. I definitely do not know anything.
Well, what I was thinking is for our next episode, we should probably get back to like our like actionable 5 ways to do something on somewhere. And I don't know what that is yet, but by next week, we'll know.
Thanks for having me on here. I'm very excited.
Thanks for being on here. And to our listeners, thanks for being with us.
Cheers.
Peace.
And that's how the cookie crumbles. Okay, bye. Ta-ta for now.
You've been listening to the CD Baby DIY Musician Podcast, broadcasting from Portland, Oregon, USA.